Hello to our viewers, and thank you for tuning in to Alberta Electronic Music's first Virtual Electronic Music Summit. I'm Dr. Jonathan Hamill. I'll be facilitating the discussion today. To give you a bit of background on myself, I split my time fairly evenly between musical and medical pursuits, having studied and worked in music for many years, being involved in the local music community, and also working as a medical doctor and specialist in psychiatry. Today's topic is a pretty broad exploration of health, mental health, and the current and future realities for the music industry and public gatherings in light of the COVID pandemic. I have to say it's been a pretty surreal few months for me. At the start of this, I never had nightmares, but I was actually having strange apocalyptic dreams and things like that. Then I started to adjust to and actually kind of enjoy this new normal, nesting, being at home, working virtually, taking a bit of a step out of the rat race. But now as restrictions ease up, I have to admit I'm finding myself a bit lost as to how to comfortably resume normalcy. One of the main reasons this virtual electronic music summit is taking place is because of how drastically COVID has impacted musicians in the music industry. Basically, everything is either on hold or online. So I'm thankful we have the internet and technology that allows us to safely meet and connect with each other across time zones, across continents, and with our viewers. But yeah, I'm excited to welcome our panelists and the broad range of perspectives they bring. I very much appreciate your time and willingness to be a part of this. In a moment, we'll have a round of introductions, but in brief, I'd like to welcome Dr. Lenora Saxinger, who gave one of the most memorable talks I had during medical school back in 2009 about HIV. Steve Rowland, who's worked extensively as a DJ producer and as actually marketing as well as mental health guru, who's just killing it in the online side of things with Black Octopus Sounds. Kristen Gilbert, who, like me, has both music and science degrees and backgrounds, and she continues to work in and excel at both as a DJ producer, occupational therapist, and mental health researcher. And a special welcome to Seetal Panesar from England, a psychotherapist specializing in the music industry, who I connected with through the Music Industry Therapists Collective. All right, so whoever would like to begin.
We can just go left to right because that way we won't have awkward pauses.
Okay, sounds good.
One of my defining characteristics is I always leap into the awkward pause. So as mentioned, I'm an infectious diseases specialist. I did internal medicine and then infectious diseases. Prior to that, my path was uncertain, and I decided that if I did better in microbial genetics, I would do microbiology, which led me to medicine. If I did better in dystopian literature, I was going to go into the humanities. So that was a close one. I ended up in medicine. I have done a lot of teaching, as mentioned, and I want to know what was memorable about the lecture, whether it was good or bad. And part of the role that I've ended up taking during the pandemic, one big part of it is I'm co-chairing a scientific advisory group for the government. And we are doing a lot of work trying to synthesize this barrage of information coming out and trying to find the pieces that are information to inform policy and planning in healthcare, and to some extent in public health. And so that's been a very, very consuming job. And so to me, it almost, the pandemic lockdown to me meant an additional 30 hours of work a week, mostly in my house, unless I was on call in the hospital, in which case it was a very scary time, actually. I think people were really frightened and weren't sure what was going to happen. And so I think it was a surreal for many different reasons. And now that it's kind of leveling out, I think everyone's adjusted to the risk, and the risk within hospitals does not seem as high here as it clearly is elsewhere. And we're also trying to figure out, how do we manage ourselves and what can we do and not do. And and it's a period of a lot of adjustment. I have also started doing a lot more media requests, I think, because I perceive that everyone is so hungry for information that if information is not provided from a source that should be fairly reputable, I've been spending a lot of time on this topic, so hopefully I'm reputable, that people will take information from any source going. And I think that at this time, that's very dangerous. And so I've also stepped out of my comfort zone in terms of, media and public interactions, because I'm actually an introvert, believe it or not. So, but I think it's important. And I think that this type of venue is very important, because we have to regain our sense of community, and this is part of that. So thank you for inviting me.
No, absolutely. Thank you for joining us. All right. So I'm not sure if everyone's left to right is the same as mine.
Yeah, I think mine's definitely different. So I think I'll just step in here and go next.
Sure.
Yep. So hey everybody, my name's Steve, and I live in Edmonton, Alberta, and sort of my main area of focus lately has been my business that I co-run with a business partner. It's called Black Octopus Sound. We run an online music production resource web store selling digital products to support music producers in making music better, faster, and more enjoyably. So that's kind of my main shtick, but I also have a background in love and relationship coaching, and I have this lifelong burning passion for just how people connect with each other, whether it's in a romantic context, in a business context, in a friendship level context. Yeah, that's something that really drives me every day, is just the endless fascination for all the different subtle mechanisms that run for people internally, whether they be mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and how those mechanisms in one person's internal environment interacts and engages with those often quite different mechanisms in someone else's internal environment. So yeah, I just have a big passion for connection in general. And yeah, I'm a bit of a geek when it comes to dialing in what's going on in our internal environment and how that inherently impacts what's going on in our external environment right in front of us. So yeah.
Yeah, welcome. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's an honor
absolutely.
and privilege to be here.
Yeah. Likewise.
I don't mind going next.
Sure.
So hi, I'm Seetal Panesar, and I am a counsellor and psychotherapist from London. I suppose I specialise in counselling and psychotherapy for musicians, particularly those from ethnic minority backgrounds, because I suppose my career in psychotherapy has always been working with marginalised communities, be it those from ethnic minority backgrounds, the LGBTQI+ community, sex workers, people living with HIV, basically anyone who's been othered in society. That combined with my sort of interest and love and experience in the music industry led me to find that niche that actually dealing with the idea of intersectionality and identity within the music industry. There were a number of people actually who just weren't getting access to mental health services, didn't even know that they were able to access mental health services. I mean, with the rate of mental health illnesses and issues within the music industry being at a disproportionately higher level to those in the general public, you section that with those from ethnic minority backgrounds, where there is a lot of stigma around mental health and accessing support and seeking support. There seemed to be an area and a crossover that I was very interested in working with. Therefore, I set up musicotherapy, which has that special focus on working with ethnic minority backgrounds. I also work in collaboration with the music industry therapists and coaches. And through them, we kind of do a lot of work within the industry in terms of training, support, and a bit of media coverage as well in terms of raising awareness. And I suppose the pandemic has definitely brought a huge amount of referrals in to the services. I just think it's a lot of anxiety around what's going to happen. The industry has changed for good now, and I think loss of income, changing the way music is consumed and created as well is something that is really kind of coming up now. And I think referrals in general are just skyrocketing with this anxiety and depressional symptoms are rising. So yeah, the support levels aren't and need to be matched, and currently aren't, but we're trying our best.
It's very interesting, and yes, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's great to have a platform like this.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, and Kristen.
Hi. Yeah, thank you for having me, Jonathan. I just really appreciate having conversations like this. And
absolutely.
I work by day in community mental health, mainly with people who are severely and persistently mentally ill, as an occupational therapist, occupation being anything you do, not just in terms of jobs. But I came to that career through actually a long history of teaching yoga, and I figured out that to me, OT was the most holistic type of work that I could do in the healthcare system, and it really synthesizes a lot of my passions. So I have a very long background in teaching yoga. I own a yoga studio here in the Comox Valley called the Doghouse, which is currently not operating, and we're wondering about the future of that. And as well, I've did my original degree in music and in education, and I did piano was my instrument. And so music has lifelong been a huge part of my life. And it wasn't until I started working as an OT that I delved into actually starting a career as a DJ, and then started producing as well. And musical expression is something that is tremendously therapeutic to me. It's something that I feel like I need to do. So the time of the pandemic has been really interesting because it's offered me some rest time in terms of not being up late playing gigs and expending a lot of my vital energy in the middle of the night. And the opportunity for live streaming has been something that's actually been really enjoyable because I live with other adults in a little community setting. So we have the opportunity to have a little bit of an audience here. And so I've actually been surprised at how much I've been enjoying live stream DJing. And I think that that is a piece that could very well be with us ongoing even after we can gather. But one of my biggest concerns around the pandemic is how it's impacting people's mental health. And globally, you know, we're doing this for physical health, but we are only beginning to see the grave impacts that isolating has on our mental health. And it's challenging everybody's tools in terms of our practices and what we use to support us in times of trial. It's really fascinating time that we're in, and I'm looking forward to just discussing potential solutions and creative ideas with all of you. So thank you.
Yes, thank you, Kristen. So yeah, I thought we'd start with a kind of a more broad general question for all of you. Then move into, I've got a specific question for each of you, and then we'll kind of close with another general kind of discussion points. But yeah, to start off with, I wanted to get your ideas on, get everyone's ideas on how social distancing and the shift online are affecting people physically, mentally, and creatively, and also how people are staying connected with each other, as well as health resources and health professionals.
Well, for me personally, shifting everything online has been amazing, but it's also come with its downfalls as well. Personally, screen fatigue is real. It's for me, bringing clients online and on Zoom, it's great because, you know, I'm seeing a wide range of clients who I might not have been able to see face to face in London. Location wise, things happen, people are spread out. So that's amazing. And I'm able to see more clients, and I suppose at lower costs as well, if not free for some clients. But the connection, the kind of exchange, it's tougher. I think I've personally to kind of conduct therapy sessions. It uses a lot more energy because there's less intuition through the screen. You can't feel your way through some of the issues a little bit. But I think it brings its benefits, but again, it's difficult. It's difficult when everything is online, be it your social life, your personal life, your ways of connecting, your ways of working. It's just, it feels like it's just one mode, and that can be quite a lot to carry.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, that's interesting. That's something I have noticed in the shift to virtual appointments by phone or video is, you know, I find that patients who maybe kind of talk a bit longer, you know, our conversations are generally a bit more concise. They fit nicely. They're easier to wrap up. Another interesting thing I've been finding is, you know, some people have a hard time opening up in person, you know, behind a screen or through the phone. Some people have an easier time opening up.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been an interesting change I've seen.
I've had the same thing, actually. I have, I have a fairly large HIV Hep C practice in general ID, and we shifted to virtual appointments, and I wasn't sure how it was going to go. And to be honest, a lot of people shifting to that space doesn't work for everyone, because I honestly have some patients who don't have phones. So that's hard, because I used to get a hold of them by leaving messages at their pharmacy. And then the next level up is people who have phones, but they don't necessarily have the capability of doing a Zoom or something else. And so a fair amount of my practice has actually just been on telephone. But I actually think it's made me appreciate that I might not have to drag everyone in for an appointment as regularly, because you can get a pretty decent touch base with someone that you already have a relationship with a phone visit. So if I can get them to get their lab work done and I can have a conversation with them, I feel like we've touched base and we're in a good place, and it's okay. I have had more challenges trying to do an initial assessment. So trying to forge a relationship is very different on the phone, and it's kind of forced me into just thinking about how much all the nonverbal cues add to an interaction. And also, of course, sometimes I can't see people virtually because I actually just have to see what's wrong with them. And then they come in and I'm doing it with a mask. Now that's weird, being masked all the time. I find it remarkably weird. And if that becomes like part of the necessary armamentarium of what we have to do to get into public, it's interesting how it changes your ability to communicate. And for people, especially who can't hear well, they can't see your mouth, whatever. But also just for people communicating in general, having a mask on is weird. And so I think the whole thing has shifted us into this zone of doing things because we have to do them that way, and then evaluating them and saying, is this an okay way to do it? And what is it going to look like as we figure out what the most important pieces are? How many of these tools can we keep, and how many do we say, you know what, that's not good enough, we're going to have to do something different? And so there's this massive filtering, I think. And then, of course, for me, on the scientific side behind it, we're all trying to figure out how much distancing or masking or hand washing add to safety, and what the numbers of safe gatherings are. And all these things are so intensely important, and we're trying to find answers, but really it's difficult. And really, we've only had this disease on the planet in a big way for about 5 months. So it's early days yet. There's so many shifting uncertainties. I think it's really a challenge.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
No, that's interesting. Sorry. I think the boundaries have shifted, and I think that's what it is. So some clients feel more inclined to share with the kind of safety, within the safety of their own homes, with the screens. Some don't. So I've had pretty much a quite similar experience where I've had new clients who wouldn't come in person, but are happy via video sessions, some who would want to come in person but want to start via video, which I'm wondering how that might be. We've already had a start, we've already kind of started forming this therapeutic relationship in this format online, and what will the implications of kind of meeting in person and having almost a new start be to the relationship? I think those are questions that I'm thinking of now as well, as we start kind of reintegration to whatever level that might look like in each region.
Yeah, I've got something coming up for me that I'd like to tack onto the conversation here.
Mhm.
So, like, weaving it back into the context of the impact this is having on musicians and music producers, DJs, and the music industry in general. Like, the question is how is social distancing impacting basically all of us physically, mentally, and creatively? And so I'm just going to roll with an analogy for a moment. It's like, let's say we're walking out in the forest and we see a deer, right? And we step on a twig and the deer notices us. The ears perk up, it looks in our direction, and takes off, right? And so what's happening there is the sympathetic nervous system is getting triggered. It's our fight, flight, freeze response. And which happens when there is not necessarily evidence of an immediate threat, but the possibility of a threat. There doesn't necessarily, like, if I'm walking through the forest, I'm not going to hurt a deer. Most of us wouldn't, but the deer takes off anyways because of the possibility of a threat. And so what I'm noticing now in human interactions, especially going out to the grocery store, there's like this wall, there's like this layer that's present in people now. There's this underlying texture of anxiety that's present, that's triggering that mechanism in us, that's starting to treat pretty much everybody like they're a threat. Like, you go out into a grocery store and it's like sometimes the tension is so thick you can cut it with a knife. It's like if people aren't following social distancing suggestions impeccably, there's like this like fight mechanism that's starting to show up in people. And yeah, just like something that I'm really aware of is that when it comes to being creative and really expressive in a musical context, it's so important that we lock back into that parasympathetic nervous system place of just being chill and relaxed and in our ease, and having an ability to be in a relaxed place, connecting with other people or our art form. Like it's almost like a garden hose. When that anxiety is present, it's like it's like pinching off a garden hose. We can be relaxed and in our ease. That's when I think creativity, especially in these crazy times, can be optimized. So what I've been encouraging in myself and other people around me that I've been speaking to is just find ways to manage the discomfort that's present. If we can do something like even integrate a breathing practice that helps us calm things down, any little micro steps we can take to tweak our internal environment to point our ship towards being in ease, I think there's some real medicine in that.
I agree with you, Steve, and I see that the fear is real for so many people, and for those who have, we are all having a collective worldwide experience of groundlessness. We've all been thrust into the not knowing of what our world is going to look like in 3 months or in a year. And for those people who have developed tools to navigate uncertainty, now is the time where we're really calling on all those tools. But for people who haven't, this is a really intense time. It's an intense time for everybody. But in terms of our mental health, I think, I'm glad to hear, Sital, that you are busier than ever, and in terms of your supporting people in their mental health, and that people are able to access that. And being a part of the mental health system, I really want to be looking forward to, like, we're going to see suicides rise and overdoses rise. This happens historically whenever unemployment takes a huge increase. We know that this happens through history, and just the importance of cultivating personal tools in whatever way you can right now, it's paramount. It's essential for our survival. And you know, for artists, I think that this time can actually be a really creatively potent time, especially if you've already invested that time in opening the creative flow. It's already there. For people who, you know, want to be creative and they haven't necessarily found that, this time may just be too stressful to even start finding that. But in terms of, if you've got your creative flow and you can find some sense of ground within yourself, then this is an amazing opportunity where we have more time to alchemize the collective experience into art, because I do think that art will always be made, and what that's going to look like moving forward still remains a mystery.
I just have, riffing off that a tiny bit, I'm really interested by the kind of idea that we're putting around the anxiety, and how that affects your state of creativity, and how it actually affects like everything you do in terms of interactivity. And I keep on circling around an idea of how do we get a sense of community back? Because I think when you get right down to it, we have to make proxies for a sense of community, and people have missed many communities. Like sports fans miss watching sports. People who make and create and share in music, where that's a primary focus, have had that kind of taken away, and you're looking for the proxy. And even just in terms of going out in the world, because of the armed state that we were talking about, people are just feeling like the world is out to get them, right? And that is a profoundly unhealthy way to have to live for any duration of time. And when I'm looking at the information people need, I keep on trying to figure out, how do we communicate what's a reasonable amount of anxiety and a reasonable amount of risk in this time, and how much of it can you actually let go? And I think people are really wanting firmer ideas of what is okay, what is not okay, what do I really have to worry about? And it's difficult because the people filtering the information that's coming forward are filtering it through their own risk perception too. So I sit on a group and we can all look at the same number of scientific papers about transmission and actually come to different conclusions, which seems somehow wrong, but it's how you weight all these different pieces. And so I feel like we have to reach a state of kind of more of balanced risk and anxiety, and really, really try to work around that to get connection again by whatever means. And I'm observing right now with this conversation, and I have also having like a glass of wine and playing silly games with neighbors on Zoom or other platforms. You can actually get a sense of community back through other means. It's not the same, but it's still good. And those are very safe. And then we have to like make the goalposts or set up the signs for how we can start engaging in a way that feels more normal. I mean, I was reading something about a word, what language is it from? It translated into skin hunger. And the skin hunger is that a lot of people really miss touch, you know, and especially if you're sheltering in place without someone else there, that's terrible, you know. And
you
no
realize how
proxy
much
can
you
take
miss
care
it
of that,
when
right?
you don't have it. Yeah.
So I mean, it's just a really challenging time. But setting up an expectation of, we can't have zero risk, but here are reasonable things we can do, and figuring out and adjusting that, because that's the other thing people don't like, is when you change the rules, but sometimes we change them because we learn things. So we have to actually also learn flexibility.
Yeah.
And the flexibility is that, well, now we know this is okay. It didn't used to be okay. That doesn't mean that we're flip-flopping. That means we've learned more and we're trying to figure it out. And so that's also weird. People don't like that. They don't like uncertainty, and they don't like perceived shifting and flip-flopping. But I think that we have to get a collective agreement that we're going to do the best we can in the moment we're in together.
And I think that's gonna come slowly. I think now that there's a realization, I feel like there's been a lift in the sense that people are realizing that this isn't just a quick pause on life and then things will resume as normal. I think for the first, when we went into lockdown, etc., I think there was this idea that, okay, we're pausing for a bit and then we'll get back out. It was almost like a holiday from reality. But now, as you know, the measures are kind of going to be long term and things are shifting. For permanently, that we're going to see more sort of proxies for communication and connection, and networking, and the rise of the community, I suppose, in other forms, hopefully.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, that's awesome. Thank you. Thank you all. I wanted to ask some individual questions. I wanted to ask Dr. Saxinger, as a specialist in infectious diseases, are you able to explain in basic terms what this coronavirus is and why it's become such a big problem so fast?
Right. This is actually on our list of pandemic threats. I think coronaviruses have hovered around our consciousness since 2003 when the SARS coronavirus came out. And initially, when this coronavirus popped up, it was seeming to be a similar story. It's likely derived from an animal. There's a lot of viruses that affect a lot of species. And in SARS in 2003 and in another similar virus called MERS, it seemed to jump the species barrier, and then also be capable of being transmitted person to person. And so it makes sense that it would take place in an area of the world where there's exotic animal markets. So that brings in samples of viruses from all over the place into one area and a massive population of people right around it. And so, although I think this could have arose anywhere, it arose there because of odds. And it happened to be very good at spreading person to person. And the thing that distinguished it from SARS 2003, if anyone's old enough to remember, was that one kind of burnt itself out. And this one has not burnt itself out. This has gone up to 5 million cases in 5-6 months. And it also, many people get it with negligible symptoms, maybe not even noticeable. But a proportion of people get very significantly ill, and a proportion of people die. And so the fatality rate is much higher than other pandemics like pandemic influenza as well. And one of the things that we're learning is that the reason that this one is tougher to control and why it's not burning out is because you get a lot more virus replicating, like in your mouth, nose, throat, very, very early, even before you have real symptoms. And people who are just starting to get symptoms are probably the people who are responsible for a lot of the spread. Whereas the other SARS, the viral amounts were higher, lower in the chest and later in disease. And so people were sick for a while and ended up in hospital or isolating. They weren't well enough to go out, and they weren't spreading it as much. So just the biologic pattern of this makes it much harder to control, because if you just control on the basis of symptoms, you're going to miss some transmission. And so that's why we're grappling with what's okay, because a lot of people are like, well, if everyone just stays home if they're sick, we should be okay. But actually, that's probably not true. We have to add these other measures for people who don't know they're infected. And so that's part of the kind of fear factor. With that though, I'm also going to point out that people also are developing a lot of fear of objects and packages and delivery food and stuff. And that fear to me seems likely unfounded. I think really most of the transmissions occur in face-to-face and fairly long contact with shared airspace or shared utensils or a buffet or something, with people who have infection and are not yet aware that they could be spreading it. So it is a people-driven thing. I don't think it's driven that much by surfaces and things, but that has profound implications for gatherings of people. And those are the things we need to figure out about how can we make that safe again. Especially in the setting of a music industry or any kind of gathering. And I think that's why everyone's really not sure what it's going to look like going forward. So it's, and the risk is not going to go away quickly. It's still circulating. And when we look for it, we find it. And it's, and so it raises a lot of questions about mobility and people moving between places and meeting each other. Because there's always going to be some degree of risk, and we have to figure out where the line is for all of those things. And so it's quite unlike anything we've come across before, compared to Ebola, which spreads easily, but it makes people extremely, extremely sick very, very quickly. And the reason it spreads is because people have so much virus when they're intensely ill. It's a different containment than this. So it's kind of sneaky. And certainly a big shift in how we do everything, honestly, for potentially forever in medicine and public health.
No, thank you. That's very interesting. Yeah. Steve, I wanted to ask you, as someone who's, been quite successful and respected in the online side of the music industry, what trends have you been seeing, online in business since social distancing and isolation became a thing?
Yeah, so what's obviously been happening in the external side of business, like storefronts have been closing down, restaurants have severely diminished hours or have closed down altogether. And so like stores that require us to leave the house and go outside to do our shopping have all been severely impacted in a harmful way. So before I say what I want to get into next, I just want to offer my sincere compassion for everybody who's struggling in those domains. And yeah, it's a tough time for a lot of people. And I just wanted to
Mhm.
really own that there's a struggle going on out there. And what I've personally noticed through my particular lens of reality is that businesses that are more in the online domain, particularly businesses that are easy to shop at while people are at home, a lot of online businesses are actually doing sales increases, Black Octopus included. As soon as the shutdown happened in March, our sales actually went up a significant amount. And it was kind of flabbergasting to a degree, because there's almost like this cognitive dissonance between like what's happening in my unique perception of reality versus a lot of the struggles that a lot of people out there are having. And so yeah, it's kind of just been an interesting thing to process. And a lot of my peers in similar areas of the music industry who have their own online businesses, that a lot of them are actually seeing a surge in sales. And so yeah, I mean, there's businesses that are just leveraged by people staying at home, and especially people who create products for music producers. And all of a sudden we have all of these people who aren't working anymore. They're getting free money from the government, some of them, and they've just got a lot of time to spend. And for a lot of them, music production is their escape. It's like the one thing, or one of the main things that brings them a sincere amount of joy in their life. And so to kind of be in that position of being a provider for that is a huge honor and a privilege, and not something that I take for granted. And something that we actually did, that if you're a music producer and watching this, you can actually go to the Black Octopus website, and we're actually offering a free sound library for music producers who might be struggling with money and staying at home. Like one thing that we saw was that a lot of musicians lost their tour revenue. And so yeah, there was almost like this ethical piece that came up for me. It's like our sales are going up, but a lot of our artists' revenue is going down, and that's just not okay with me. So we got Toby and I, my business partner, we got together and had a team huddle and decided that we wanted to go through our entire artist roster and find out who's lost some touring revenue. And then we offered them a payment up front to produce some material for a product for us, as a way of us showing up for our artists. And
Mhm.
now we've taken that product and have created a free offering for the music production community. So it's on the Black Octopus website. It's called Stay at Home Beats, and it's free to download. Actually, we have a couple pretty sweet free offerings on the site. So just thought I'd
That's
put that
really
out there.
cool.
Yep,
Yeah.
there's the invitation if that's something you're interested in. And yeah, and somebody alluded to it earlier, and it was just a highly important piece, is like the way that people are consuming musical content is changing. The demand for streaming.
Ooh.
Hey
Oh,
everybody.
you're back.
Hi.
The demand for streaming is it's incredibly amplified. There's so many people who've lost their shows, and they have this burning passion to share their art and their gift with the world. And so yeah, online streaming
Weird.
the online streaming universe is exploding right now. And so yeah, I mean, there's definitely a wisdom to leveraging that. If there's a person who's a music producer and they want to enhance and encourage and nourish their livelihood, and so yeah, I think I'll complete at that, is that
Mhm.
anything that requires people to stay indoors, and especially in a business context in the music industry, the fruit is ripe to nourish that part of our world right now. So if that's something that people are interested in, it's a great time to explore that.
To make use of it, take advantage of it. Absolutely.
Can I briefly say something, Jonathan?
Oh, of course, yeah.
I just wanted to acknowledge you, Steve, for giving back in that way. It's really amazing. And I think across the music industry, we are seeing lots of generosity in terms of, certain companies stepping up and taking care of their artists, like Bandcamp, who had a couple of days where they announced that 100% of the revenue was going to go to artists. And, Beatport partnered with AFEM, which, Jonathan and I are both members of, and they're supporting members of the industry that are kind of lower paid members, maybe not artists, but support people. And so even on a micro level with the clients that I work with, I am seeing a lot of generosity from people. And that's an amazing thing to see in a time of extreme challenge, is to see the humanity of people stepping forward. My clients who are marginalized and who live in poverty are saying, you know what, I'm getting more money from the government right now, and I want you to give that food to someone who really needs it. So thank you for bringing that forward in terms of the generosity of what happens in times of trial. I think it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, Kristen, I wanted to ask you, as someone who's, got extensive involvement and training in both health and music, also as a person who I think of as a very balanced individual, I wanted to ask what you have been doing to stay sane and healthy.
Well, thank you for that. I like to think of, I think balance is a moving target, in that I do consider myself to be overall a balanced individual, and there's a balance pendulum that tends to swing. So especially when we first went in, I wasn't feeling particularly balanced, and across the board, I think for people, there's the tendency to want to escape, and we shouldn't beat ourselves up for that. Interesting that our governments have mandated that liquor stores and dispensaries are essential services through this time. But for me personally, I really need to move a lot in terms of that. I find that exercise helps my mental health. And so in terms of, maintaining community, like you were saying, Lenora, I've been doing online classes once or twice a day. Like I do, HIIT CrossFit endurance classes, I do pole dance classes, I do yoga classes, and it's not as good as being in person, but it's helpful to connect in with our communities in that way. And everyone's making sourdough these days. My roommate actually has been working on a spelt sourdough with variable success, but we've definitely both gone into COVID food preparation in terms of like, let's make exciting recipes. Let's just spend our money on groceries because we can't spend it on anything else. Let's make our food our sense of nourishment and entertainment, and also not overeating, because that can be another form of escapism. It's definitely easy to slide into drinking cocktails every day, but I'm happy to say this pendulum has swung back on that one, and I'm like, okay, weekends, that's for weekends. So I also have a very strong spiritual practice. I meditate every day for 24 minutes. I do pranayama and breath work as well. And in terms of, my tools, I'm also taking a course, an Enneagram course on personality typing, and it's with my teacher who I've done a lot of silent retreats with. I actually, 2 weekends ago, I went on my own personal silent retreat for 4 days and 3 nights. And I figured it's as good a time as any to really take that time out to sign off of my phone. I've gone off of Facebook scrolling, especially. I still check my messenger messages, but it was affecting my mental health to go on Facebook and to see everyone having their opinions and venting and posting all of this fake news. And I was like, you know what, that's just jacking up my sympathetic nervous system in a way that is not working for me. So done with scrolling on Facebook. And yeah, just making time to prioritize connecting with people, even if that's virtually. You know, I'm blessed to live in an area with lots of forest and nature, and we can still go for walks and hikes with our friends. We can stay 2 meters apart. We know now that it's very unlikely to have COVID be transmitted when you're outside in nature. So this is really a wonderful piece that when we can enjoy. If you have nature close to you, it's tremendously important for our mental health to not only go enjoy that, but possibly do it with other people in a way that feels safe. So those are some of the things that I've been doing. Oh yeah, and the other thing I wanted to mention was, for me, slowing down. As you can tell, I'm a doer. I like to do lots of different things. And because I like to move, even before COVID happened, I was recognizing that I needed to slow down, and also recognizing that I didn't really know how. And then the universe just pumped the brakes on everything. And so I've been prioritizing sleeping, and free sleeping, like sleeping as long as I need to and waking up whenever I wake up, and prioritizing resting and rejuvenating my adrenals, which is really important to me. And so I'm as bummed as anybody else that festivals are not happening this summer. And I'm also okay with taking a year off to really heal and give myself the rest that I need in terms of my longevity. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing.
Thanks.
Yeah. And Cecil, I wanted to ask, as a therapist working specifically with clients in the music industry, since the pandemic began, like how have the big concerns people bring forth, how have those evolved?
I think the big one that's really springing up is the idea of not being able to perform in the ways that musicians are used to. So that feeling, that energy, that adrenaline that's pumping when you're on stage, and you can feel that connection and interactivity with the crowd. That's a big one. And I think the loss of collaboration and connection is another big one. I think that really kind of hones down and hits into a musician's sense of worth and value. I think that's what I'm seeing at the moment with clients. There's a real impact to their self-esteem and their confidence. And I suppose actually the confidence in going back and re-entering that forum when things have changed. It's like they're struggling with knowing where their place will be, and I suppose the classic ones of loss of income. Their plans for the years have been scrapped, and some musicians, they're struggling with the adaptation. And whilst it's great that there are so many other platforms for musicians to kind of hone in on and experience, that can be really difficult for some musicians who actually might not be literate in being able to do that. I've got a few clients who are just vocalists, for instance, and they aren't able to kind of produce that music themselves. So actually their creativity, they feel like it's been stunted, and so the anxiety around that, they're unable to then create and use the experiences around them to put it into their creative process. So there's a real block there, and that's, I suppose anxiety is the underlying issue for it all, and I suppose we can all relate to that in terms of the uncertainty and just not knowing what's going to happen. So I think that's, and also I suppose for some musicians as well, their support system has completely disappeared. For those who are touring artists, you think about the tour buses and just the crew. Everyone is your family. You are on the road sort of most of the year with your artists, and with the musicians and the crew and the tech and everyone. That suddenly just disappeared. So actually the level of isolation that they're facing is exacerbated. Obviously we're all sort of socially isolated in that sense, but that they feel it a lot more, and I think that's really coming to play now in the sessions, and it's hugely impacting their mental health, and I suppose their place in the world. I think there's a lot of questioning going on in terms of who they are. And yeah, that goes down to identity, and so much of it is entangled in creating and delivering music.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, that's very interesting. Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, we've got about, I'd say maybe about 10 minutes for kind of closing question. And then if you guys wanted to ask each other questions or have a bit of back and forth conversation, I think that would be awesome. But yeah, for about the last 10 minutes, I thought we could maybe discuss, what will or what might be the realities for public gatherings and music events in the future, and ways we can do that safely, as well as some of the positives that you've gained from the experience of being in a pandemic that you'd like to take forward with you.
I'm looking doubtful about the second one.
Open air venues, lots of open air venues. And I think, especially in England, the idea of festivals, it's all crammed into 3 short months of the summer season. So I think perhaps, exploring the idea of open venues all year round and actually make provisions for the weather in terms of new kind of, I suppose, structures outside. I think that could be one of the more creative solutions to kind of indoor arenas. I think the pandemic is the death of the mosh pit at the moment. So yeah, open air, I think, is the one that I'm thinking of.
That's a cool idea. I like that.
I would totally agree. I think, we're still learning about transmission in large groups. And if we can get a better idea of the dynamics, like what are the riskiest things, I think that'll make it a little bit easier to give guidance. But at the moment, the fundamentals are air exchanges, shared airspace, and distance. And outdoors offers a lot of benefit for all of those things. And also the degree to which, testing or symptom screening might help prevent someone who's unwittingly potentially infectious from entering a group. Like, how useful might that be? And so I think we're going to end up having to refine our idea of risk and see what we think collectively is acceptable. Right now, we see groups of people who are basically refuting any concept of risk and, getting together in large groups, large shouty groups, clusters, protesting lockdown. And I can't imagine anything worse as an idea. And then other people who have gone to the extreme of actually carrying a huge amount of stress about even accepting a package. And I think the truth really is going to be in the middle, and that we're going to have to just sort our way through that. And in terms of gatherings like that, I think outdoors makes a big difference. Another idea would be, can people wearing PPE still have, like personal protective equipment, still have a good experience in the world? I mean, even when I was seeing, we haven't had a ton of COVID patients here, but when I was going to see them, I was wearing a yellow isolation gown over my lab coat and clothes, a mask, a face shield, gloves. It's not a spacesuit, and that's someone who I know is infected. I'm still okay. And so, is there a role for trying to figure out what we can do to make ourselves as individuals safer in an environment? And there's some training that's required to do that properly. And can we actually carry that out so public can do it right? Because I was at the grocery store having a similar grocery store experience to Steve. And I think I saw people wearing their mask on their chin, dangling off the ear. I saw a girl talking to her friend, and she pulled her mask off so she could talk and then put it back on. And I'm like, you're defeating the purpose so badly there. So I think there's a lot of questions we have to negotiate. But the end goal is, I think no one wants to keep people apart from people for too long, but we don't want to make people have excess risk. And finding that balance is really, really tough. And I think for the moment, caution is the way to do it. And there's places farther ahead than us. So places that have already had their epidemic peak and they're starting to reopen more, and we're looking at what happens there, that might help inform us. And we're going to have to be very attentive to the global experience as people start opening up and getting together again, because that's the only way we can figure it out. So continued transparency about what's going on is going to be very important. And hopefully no one will have any big problems with opening up more in large gatherings. I mean, there was that nightclub incident not that long ago that kind of told us that that type of gathering is still probably not a good idea. I think that was in Korea, and quite a lot of contacts. So it's it remains very uncertain. And I guess if I was going to say one thing to the latter part of your question, positives I think would be there has been some increased collaboration and faster, more effective collaborations in medicine and science than I've seen ever before. I mean, there's been a united front. And it's only now that we're starting to see people get grabby in academic boundary, hey, I did that first kind of about it. And until now, actually, it's been an immense outpouring of just pure supportive, we have to figure this out together. And I think that experience is important to realize it can happen. And I really value some of that working together very much.
Mm-hmm.
I recently did an interview with Tarun Nayar from Delhi to Dublin, and he has a record label as well, and he's a visionary as far as I'm concerned, and he has come up with all kinds of interesting solutions to the pickle that we're in. His record label, they throw a Twitch party every Saturday night, and he lives on the Lower Mainland and is really very much supported by the South Asian population there, and they have dance competitions on Zoom, and they give away prizes, and he said people are just lit, like they are so excited to be doing this and interacting in the way that they can. So he's really done an amazing job of creating a virtual community. And similar to the article you sent us, Jonathan, he also had a car rave a couple weekends ago on the Lower Mainland, where people drive and stay in their cars and hang out, which there is a demand for me personally. That doesn't include dancing, so the draw isn't quite the same if I can't actually dance to the music, but people are showing that they still want to gather, even if they have to, drive around in their car and talk to people from their car windows. So that's really exciting. And I have a friend here who has purchased a bunch of silent disco headphones, and weekly he goes out to, he'll announce a location and there's about 40 headphones, and we usually go somewhere in the forest, and the DJ can power off of an inverted car battery, and with the silent disco headphones, obviously the noise isn't going to attract any trouble, and people can stay 2 meters apart and be outside in the forest. So these are some examples of some interesting ways that people are managing to still connect through community, like you were talking about earlier, Lenora, and I agree that community is tremendously important for our mental health. And I just think moving forward, we can't forget about how important it is for us as a species to gather and to appreciate music, whatever kind of music that we love, because this experience of connection is something that we've literally done for millennia. How we do it has evolved through many, many years, but as we reintegrate and as we find new ways of doing things, even if we can't gather in this way for the next 1.5 years, 2 years, we cannot forget about the importance of gathering in community and the rhythmic entrainment and the connection that happens when we do.
Yeah. I just wanted to add that I suppose this kind of time that we're in at the moment has allowed me to focus on the smaller victories in life, just focus on those small things, pause and reflect. I think it has been an opportunity to do that. I think it's given me a chance to practice what I preach a lot of the time, in terms of taking that time to reflect and focus on those smaller things. So I've been able to do that and kind of get in touch with the things that I used to love in life that I just, life gets in the way. You are making time for that. And cooking, I suppose what you were saying, Kristen, was in terms of spending all my money on groceries and trying some adventurous recipes and cooking up a 3-course meal when I can has been a little joy that I've been focusing on. And what you were saying, Steve, as well, though, the idea of dissonance in life at the moment, that actually through this, what we're going through, it's actually given my own business a boost, but it feels great that I'm able to support and help, but there's something there that I feel uncomfortable with, but I'm sitting with that because it means that, you know, there's a reason why there's a rise in what I'm doing. But I suppose on that plus side, that means that then I can offset that, and those who are financially struggling but still need that support, I'm able to offer that for free or very, very low cost, which is nice. It offsets that discord a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, one thing I think I was actually telling Kristen this the other day that I want to take forward is I realized that I had kind of forgotten what it feels like to actually have adequate sleep most of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I want to keep doing that. It's been a nice change. Yeah. But yeah, if anyone had anything else to add, feel free, or if you want to ask each other questions, yeah.
I've got something I want to like to chip in here.
Sure.
Something that I just want to acknowledge that I've been noticing as an emerging reality with the cancellation of festivals is an increased level of community mindedness and a sense of togetherness. The example that's top of mind is Base Coast Festival, where they announced that they had to cancel and were approached it in such an honest and transparent way, where they basically let people very, very well know that you know, ticket sales is how we run the festival, and because we've had to cancel this year, we're in a very big pinch. And they provided an invitation for people to donate their tickets to the festival, and provided a whole bunch of options for people so that to help minimize the impact on the Base Coast Festival itself. And what I'm seeing is like a sense of like, yeah, I will happily donate my ticket money to the festival just so that they can thrive and survive. And so I'm seeing this almost amplified community mindedness and value for supporting the people who are throwing the public gatherings. You know, this is less on the like the risk mitigation conversation, and it's more of like the community togetherness kind of mindset conversation. And I just love how I've been seeing that. And yeah, I just wanted to spotlight that to promote that and encourage that, because you know, I've seen in the past where, you know, a person pays $400 for a music festival ticket, and then they get there and then they complain about having to wait in line to get in, and they blame the festival for that. They go inside and they complain about how much food costs at the food vendors, and they blame the festival for that. They complain about the music. You know, there's like the sense of like me versus them. I've paid X amount of money for my ticket, and that entitles me to like be in opposition to what they're actually providing. And so there's like been like an historical like me versus them kind of context. I've not for everybody, of course, but that's certainly has been running for some people. And so I just wanted to spotlight that amplified. Yeah, I really value this offering that these festival producers are providing to the community, and I want to be a part of, you know, being a part of the support system. So
yeah, and I think echoing that, especially I know in London here, the smaller venues, not taking away festivals, just venues for the, you know, music gigs, they have all been shut down at the moment. So I think there's a lot of community rallying and support for some of the lesser known, smaller independent venues that are just struggling. And so the kind of call out and call to support and call to action is being felt, and people are just so more than willing to kind of help out, because it's uncovering that value of importance, that how dear this culture and the music society is to us, and the community is just pulling together in those ways. And I think it is beautiful to see. Yeah,
totally. There's like this quality of nourishing the ecosystem, like a value for nourishing the ecosystem.
And I think actually the importance of music as a soothing technique for those who aren't even in the industry is being highlighted, that actually those who are in turmoil and are experiencing anxiety and other forms of anything at the moment, they're turning to music. Actually, they're putting on music. It's a form of catharsis. It's a form of escapism. And actually the musicians of the world, it's, you know, there's a sense of healing that's coming from from musicians to others. And I think it's shining an importance of how important music is in our society on a wider scale, and we need it. It's fundamental for us.
Absolutely.
I was thinking about how everyone who's going through this experience, it's like you're grieving the loss of what you knew and what you thought was going to happen. And then you're also facing this, but what is going to happen? But when you think about how people grieve things, you have to spend some time being angry or denying it or all those things. And then you get to a point of, well, apparently this is where we're at. And I think a really big switch is when people start thinking about where we are and how to deal in this space of grief for the current and future together. And so some of what you're discussing, I think, is people going through that and saying, what do we value and how can we go forward? And it is kind of almost like working through those latter stages of grief. And I think that the togetherness piece is just so important. And I just think that the descriptions of how music community is pulling together, and we've seen the same thing in healthcare and science, is just so key. And it actually is a bit of a value exercise. Like, what do we value? And I think that can turn bad and good. But we've certainly seen lots of examples of good.
Mm-hmm.
And I would also like to add that, this is an unprecedented time. This has been a very difficult time for everyone in a variety of different ways. And there's been silver linings to this time, like what we were talking about, Sita, with cooking, and with Jonathan getting more sleep. And so as we reintegrate, as we come back to what people may call the new normal, I think it's really important to be conscious about the silver linings and the awakenings that we've had during this time, and to consciously restructure our lives. For me, it's like having a sustainable schedule that isn't so crazy busy that I'm ultimately getting depleted and it's usurping my vital energy. How can I recreate my life moving forward to be more sustainable and incorporate the things that I've learned, all the silver linings, if you may.
Mm. Yeah, well, I think that takes us to about 65 or 70 minutes. So I'm wondering if we should just leave a bit of time for us to respond to the viewer questions for the broadcast.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. But yeah, no, that's awesome. Thank you guys all for being a part of this.